Greetings today, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Kimberell Eventide, and we are going to discuss all about spiritual oneness and what it means to me. And I hope to take some questions or comments, and we can have a nice little chat today on a Sunday. I see a lot of people have joined. Mike Vannon, welcome. It's nice to see everybody, and some Elven Soul members of the channel. So, all right. Well, you can write down your comments below and I will answer them in a little bit. First, I just want to start off with a famous J.R.R. Tolkien quote about oneness and what it means to me. We have come from God, and inevitably the myths woven by us, though they contain error, will always reflect a splintered fragment of the true light, the eternal truth that is with God. So, regardless if you believe in God or not, I believe that this quote is actually talking about a spiritual oneness, because he is saying that all of the myths have been woven by humanity throughout the ages. And though they might contain human error and mistakes, they also reflect a higher truth, splintered fragment of the true light. And that's how I believe we all are in terms of our state of oneness. It is fragmented. And so, like a prism, if you take a prism and you hold it up to the light, you can see all of the colors come through on the other side. So to me, that's what I see when I look at this world. I see a fragmented reality of a prime source, one source that we all emanate from, and that has given us consciousness, and that we can all go back to one day. So whatever you believe that source is, to me, that is the oneness. And although the world is very divided politically, economically, emotionally, spiritually, everybody's fighting and arguing. If you have an understanding about the way that light works and the refractions of the white light in the universe, then you can understand why we all represent different aspects of that one source. So that to me is what oneness means. And it seems like Tolkien himself understood that everything is a glimmer of higher truth. And there are some things that are going to ring true to us, universal truths, ultimate truths. And there are some things that are just, you're going to know that they come from the ego, or they come from a place where maybe it's not an objective truth, but it's a subjective truth for one person. And so that's how I see oneness in the world, reflected that way. But I had a nice little book here called Oneness, if you're ever interested in it. It's called The Great Principles Shared by All Religions. And if you have a hard time kind of seeing the oneness principles that is scattered throughout the ages and through different spiritual paths and through different mystics and sages and all over our world, then this is a wonderful book, because it takes you into topic by topic and it shows the connection to each other. So there's a chapter called Living in Unity. So this has a couple examples of what oneness means through different spiritual paths. So the first one is Sufism. The soul of oneness is the soul of man, the soul of all-inclusive sympathy, of unity, and of non-separateness. So Sufism is one of those mystical branches that really believed in the non-duality of the state of mind that you can reach. And that's called the oneness with the divine. So a lot of Sufis are in search for that. And then we have next the Baha'i faith. The well-being of mankind, its peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established. And we'll talk about that because sometimes people think that unity is a scary word and that it could mean that we lose our individuality and that we all become one thing. And that is kind of a dystopian future to many, and many would not like us to have a sense of unity. But when you have a spiritual unity, you can have as many individual differences in the material image of you, and you can still experience a spiritual oneness within. The next one is Buddhism. Blessed is the teaching of truth. Blessed the harmony of the community. Blessed the union of those who live in peace. And the next one is Judaism. Behold, how good and pleasant it is when brothers dwell in unity. And the next one is a Native American, a Sioux Indian. So this is their spiritual path. There can never be peace between nations until it is first known that true peace is within the souls of men and women, of course. And then the next one is Hinduism. Common be your intentions. Common be the wishes of your hearts. Common be your thoughts, so that there may be thorough union among you. And yeah, it's a really lovely book called Oneness. So if you're interested in hearing more about oneness from that perspective of different spiritual paths, it's a really wonderful book by Jeffery Moses. So I have some questions here that have been emailed to me because I do talk about spiritual oneness a lot on my channel. And I know that it's not a state of being that I take for granted. It took a lot of hard work to get here, to see the oneness through the duality of the world and also through the separateness that sometimes I may feel from others. So it took a lot of work to get to this place. But when you do arrive to kind of that final moment of realization of oneness with everything, then you can kind of fall back into that. And so when the world looks so divided, you can always remember what you have learned. It's like once you learn and really experience oneness, spiritual oneness, then you never really forget. And it's always there to come back to and remind yourself. You'll have little reminders that will poke through your life coming from your higher soul to remind you when you kind of get off track and you forget. So I have a couple questions from people throughout the years that I kind of collected until one day I would talk about spiritual oneness in more of a depth. And these are genuine questions, very good questions, to the point where I think that they're worth hearing, and maybe they will help others too. So I'm going to share them anonymously. So number one was basically, what does oneness really mean to me, especially in a world that is sometimes so divided? That was a great question. And yes, it's very true. Well, I hope I showed you a little bit in the very beginning, the idea that oneness means that ultimately, on one level, we are all connected and we are all one. But on another level, we get to have fun and enjoy and sometimes struggle through the diversity of each other and knowing each other as different aspects of ourselves. So not everybody you meet is going to be a direct reflection of you. but it might be a reflection in an indirect way. It might be a mirror that is a couple mirrors down. It might be a mirror that maybe it's going to take you a while to see. It might be a mirror that you don't want to see at all. We are surrounded by mirrors. And in fact, that's kind of what infinity seems to me, and what Prime Source would be like, is a sentient consciousness that is surrounded by mirrors. And the universe is a mirror to its beauty, to its creation, to all that it can create. And we are a fractal of that. We are each a beautiful creation and a creator as well. So we are a smaller reflection of the whole, but at the same time, we are the whole. We are given that freedom to be the whole of our entire universe that is inside our minds and that we share with others and we can co-create with, which I think is a much better journey than just trying to be a sole creator of your own universe. But when you co-create with others, in the idea that it's not necessarily about creating projects together or things like that, but it is about noticing that you're in a partnership with other souls. So you can't just do everything that you want on Earth, but you have to also think of others too and how it affects them. And when you do that, I believe that that gets you closer and closer to understanding oneness, that what you do to others, you do to yourself, and you feel it really deeply and within you. So that's what oneness really means to me. It doesn't mean the same, because we're all so different and so unique, but at the same time, we emanate from the same source that provided us the potential and the opportunity to come alive, to experience this life. And on one level, it is just creation itself, and that's what we are part of. But at the same time, you can feel gratitude for it as well. And that will start to bring in more observations of beautiful things in your life and the oneness that you actually share with others. Number 2, when did I start to feel a oneness with all beings, humans, as well as beings in the universe? This is a really good question when I think about it. When did I start to feel oneness? So as a child, I was definitely a very inward, kind of introspective child. And I wouldn't necessarily say that I felt oneness because I couldn't really define it. But I felt like I belonged to others, in the idea that what I did to my friends would affect me somehow. What I would do to nature would affect me. So I couldn't really define it. So I think as a child, I actually had the feeling of oneness within me, and it gave me a life full of more peace. I was not one to always, start drama with people. In fact, I was one that would unfortunately go to people with kind of an open heart and an open mind, thinking that everybody else thought that same way. So it's an interesting way to see the one source reflected in many different aspects and versions of truth. So I think as a child, I did feel oneness, but when I could really define it, I would say that the very first time would have to be when I actually started to sit down and meditate, and I went to my first Zen Buddhist temple meeting, and I sat down in a room full of maybe 35, 40 people, and I sat quietly and meditated with everyone for about 25, 30 minutes or so. And I noticed that all the drama in my life and everything just went away, and I instantly felt connected to everything. And that's, I think, when I first realized the state of oneness. And then that's when I got more into Zen Buddhism and studied it and learned that that's really their their destination in a way. Buddhists are also, like Sufis, in quest for divine union with oneness and, seeking the higher self, which is connected to all things. So I think that the very first time I felt it was through meditation. And I think that that's why meditation is so important, because it really gives you an opportunity to really go deep and, stop the mind chatter and allow yourself to just give you that time to think about things on a very deep spiritual level. And especially if you're sitting around with other people that are kind of in the same room with you and on the same quest, that really helped me to see that. So that was probably my first experience, but as a child, I just didn't have a definition for it. But I think I could understand what oneness was when I was a kid. So number 3, sometimes oneness is spoken of badly in the spiritual community. What do you think? Can oneness or an idea of oneness ever be bad? So that comes from the idea about the New World Order and the idea that there's a dystopian future where our oneness would be forced or enforced, and we would lose our individuality and our freedoms to be ourselves. I don't have that fear. I think at one point when I went through a third eye awakening and I started seeing really strange things in the world, I think at one point I did have that fear. And then I realized when I went past the third eye into the divine crown chakra area and felt the cosmic love of the universe and one with everything, then I realized that there's something more going on, that it's not, that it's a collective experience, and that it's not up to a certain select few to determine the future of the world, if that makes sense. The idea that it is a collective experience. So we will have the future that we all collectively agree on, basically. And that, I believe, will become more and more apparent as more and more people are, having their consciousness awakening, which I believe is happening all together because of the spiritual oneness of all of us. We are having it at different points in times in our lives, and we're having it on different levels. But at the same time, I do believe that we are moving together towards something incredible, and something that we were always kind of destined to know and to awaken to. So that is the only time that I think spiritual oneness is bad, is when it's coming from a select few that would try to make everyone the same, but that's not spiritual oneness. That's just basically material plane oneness. That is a political party of oneness. That's not spiritual oneness to me. So spiritual oneness can actually never be bad. In fact, I believe that that's what would make everyone drop their weapons, because they would realize that there is no point. And that if they really want to stop the merry-go-round and fighting with each other, they can move on from that when they just choose to see each other as one. Number 4. So you have this is a funny one. So you have kind of stood out being on shows and an article as a starseed or an elf lady, as they call you, because you identify as an elf. Do you still believe in oneness at that point in time, or have you changed your mind about it? Well, I think this person is still thinking that oneness means that you can't be different. I think that we are here to express ourselves as extremely unique and different beings, because we're refracted light. We are the infinite perspectives of the infinite creator. and we are creative beings, and we are supposed to kind of create ourselves and evolve ourselves and express ourselves differently, because that's what provides the collective experience that's so unique and so diverse than other planets may have. Some planets have beings that are all the same because they are a hive mind. Many of you might have enjoyed my Abyss series that I left, and I left it on my channel for a reason, because those beings are extremely peaceful, very, very wise sea creatures from outer space. But at the same time, what they learn from humans is really important. It's about diversity, and also how humans can still connect to each other and they can still feel a sense of oneness, but at the same time they also are so diverse. Whereas the beings in Abyss are basically all the same. There's a couple different races that lives in that city of the builders, but they all kind of look similar, like all jellyfish kind of look all the same. There might be slight differences that we can't notice because it's so subtle, but the human Earth of this terrestrial field is it's such a playing field of diverse souls expressing themselves. And I have a vision in the future that it's just going to get even more and more expressive. So people need to prepare themselves, because what we have seen in the movie Star Wars and some other sci-fi movies about other beings, that's kind of what humanity might look like in the future. More and more people are becoming more and more free to express themselves in very strange ways and very unorthodox ways, and it's kind of shocking people. And I'm one of them. I guess I started to express myself as a high elf, and it kind of shocks people sometimes, like when I did those articles or when I did those videos. But I was doing that for others to feel that it's okay to be who they feel inside and to express themselves and to kind of come out of the shadows in a way, because I do believe that our future will have a potential of having spiritual oneness and unity, but at the same time be very diverse and very different expressions of that unity. And it could be a lot of fun. It could be a lot of fun. That's what I believe. Number 5, when have you not felt oneness in the world? I would say that it's hard to feel oneness sometimes in my personal lives when I'm fighting or arguing with others. I slip out of that oneness because then I'm like, this person doesn't understand me or doesn't want to connect to me, and we're so different and we see different things. But then I have to remind myself that that's part of my story and that's part of their story too. And we're reflections of each other in different ways, and we can learn from each other by having those arguments and those fights. So that's kind of what humanity is doing right now. Is there's a lot of arguing online. There's a lot of disagreement politically, emotionally, socially. But what you can do if you have an open mind going into that experience, you can actually learn from one another and increase and kind of broaden your perspectives when you do see validity in another person's perspective. And I think some of those are the greatest moments that I have witnessed because I'm so active in social media. I have seen people have disagreements, and at the end of their disagreements, they're like, well, I have a different perspective. And they have this disagreement and they can't see eye to eye. But what they can see eye to eye on is that it's not worth fighting for. So they kind of both drop their guards and then just, are polite to each other, are respectful to each other. And I think in some way it changes the other person. I really do. I feel like then they start seeing that the world is not such a harsh place, and it's not so cruel and things like that. And I think that they're both being a light in each other's world when they can see each other's perspectives. But that is probably the best example of when I have not felt oneness, is just when I have personal experiences of disagreements or things like that. I used to slip out of it really easily, but it's getting better and better for me because I have seen the oneness in all religions. I have seen the oneness in all humans trying to reach something, trying to have happiness, trying to have love. I have experienced knowing that oneness exists. So it's easy for me to kind of get back into seeing that oneness again. And it really helps, having that first awakening. Number 6, how have you found your way back to believing in oneness, since people can be so cruel and this world be so divided? Okay, so this is a great one. How have you found your way back to believing in oneness? What does it for me is stories and movies. I really love seeing our truth of reality reflected on a TV screen. I really love seeing it visually playing out, the truths of the world and the truths of our spirituality and our emotional states. So that's why I really love watching movies that kind of uplift me and show me that oneness again. I love reading stories that show oneness. And I think that when I see that, like, I can be in a terrible mood and then I'll decide to watch some, uplifting movie or something that, I don't know, just looks interesting, like a sci-fi movie, and they'll put an element of our unity or our oneness in some way. And that will just be the instant reminding that I need. I just need one little small glimmer, like Tolkien said, that glimmer of the true light of God. I just need to see one small glimmer of that unity between all souls. And it just gets me right back to that place again. So that's how I find my place back to oneness. Also meditation, and also sitting in nature. I feel a great oneness when I am just by myself out in nature and I'm looking up at the trees, I'm looking at the flowers, I'm standing on the ground with bare feet, grounding myself with a technique called earthing. And I'm feeling one with the earth again, and so my body is down here, but my mind is with the stars, and I just feel completely connected to all aspects of the universe and with others. And so a really big technique for me is to sit in nature. And I'm reminded again, and usually it's enough of a charge, a recharging for me to last for a very long time, that even if I do see divisions in the world and arguments and people are fighting and, just being cruel to each other, when I see that, I'm still reminded of that oneness experience that I already had when I was out in nature, and I see how all organisms within one ecosystem help each other, and they all help each other grow. And yeah, the tree's not arguing with, the grass and the plants and things like that around. And I get that they don't have that. But I think that that's how we are deep down inside. It's just that sometimes the ego gets in the way and challenges that ecosystem that we're building together as a collective experience. So that's really my way of getting back to that. This is a great question. This next one. How do you think oneness relates to the Elves of Tolkien? Okay, so I'm glad you asked this question. So there is a good amount of evidence within J.R.R.'s stories that because of what the elves had endured with all the wars and all of, the darkness and throughout the ages, they still understood that ultimately even the orcs and the Dark Army, they all do come from the same source. And that's kind of what their spirituality is. Although the Silmarillion mythology is kind of the old way of thinking, and a lot of the modern elves or newer elves, in a way, they didn't really so much, I guess, directly really, I guess, walk that path in terms of worship of Eru and things like that. But at the same time, even though they might have never gone to the light of Valinor or went to Valinor, they still experience a type of oneness with all beings on Middle Earth. And they notice that all the animals, all the innocent souls, like the hobbits and everything, is basically, they're stewards of. They need to protect them. And so when you have a sense of protection or sense of obligation or duty, a lot of times you believe that belongs to you in some way, that you're responsible for its growth. And I believe that the elves had a feeling that they were responsible for the growth in many ways. And so that's ultimately what made them stay or come back and help fight in the battle. But of course, sometimes it's hard for them because they think, well, this is not our doing. We're actually really peaceful over here, living in our Rivendell and our Lothlorien realms, and mankind and orcs and the hobbits don't care, but mankind and orcs, they're all making a mess of Middle Earth. And so, and the dwarves, sometimes they're selfish. So the elves, a lot of times they kind of tried to ignore that because they knew that they were not directly responsible for the mess on Middle Earth, because they were wise enough to know how to not create that mess and those wars and that chaos. But at the same time, there was a sense of belonging to every soul on Middle Earth, and that's kind of why they stayed. They knew that they couldn't leave and just allow things to happen. And so I do believe that there's a sense of oneness there. The elves that were closer to Valinor, such as Galadriel, who could remember living in Valinor, they are closer to having that spiritual path of understanding the connection between Eru and the 14 Valar. And so that's a closer spirituality for them. So they would be more in, I guess, alignment with the will of Eru. So a lot of the actions that Galadriel made was because of her belief in the oneness, since she knows that everything stems from Eru. And so she's a priestess of that kind of energy, and she's kind of a gatekeeper and holder of that energy in Lothlorien realm. And I believe that that's what keeps the realm, so purified in a way, because it's so in touch with kind of that universal will of Eru. So I think that that's why the elves can symbolize oneness in many ways, and Gandalf as well. But I do believe that they had a sense of belonging to Middle Earth. They were bound to Middle Earth, of course, but also a belonging or a sense of duty and responsibility to help the humans and help the hobbits and even the dwarves too fight against the Dark Army. This one here is, what do you think would happen if everyone was in a state of spiritual oneness always? That's such a great question. What do I think would happen? We would all live like this behind me. We would all be very wise with each other in terms of feeling a really deep connection to each other. There would be absolutely, I believe, less arguments, less fighting, less petty things. There can still be disagreements, but there are things that our ego kind of drives us to do without real conscious awareness of the spiritual oneness. So I think that people would be less acting from their ego and they would be acting from their higher self. So basically we would be like the elves living together on a world, or, you know, and it would be very diverse, but at the same time we would be as wise as them. Now, if you come to my video that's going on Sunday, the 27th, I'm talking about a wonderful movie called No Solar, the Astral City. And that's another good example of living in that spiritual oneness. It shows people, if you watch that movie, it shows what happens when you learn and you can move on to that level where you're living in spiritual oneness with others. So we'll talk more about that, because that's a really great visual example. It's hard for me to explain. I just think that it would be a far more peaceful world. And like I said, people would have more empathy, respect, more fun too. I really do believe it would be more fun, because there wouldn't be so much negative drama and we could start really having more fun with each other. I really do believe that. Next one is, are there any crystals or meditative tools that can help me get into the state of oneness? Oh, definitely. So this is the crown chakra. If you do that like every day and you listen to the vibrations and you let that frequency enter into you, because that's a particular frequency of the divine crown chakra. So that is symbolizing the cosmic love consciousness. And I believe absolutely that music is connected to us vibrationally, so it will help raise our vibrations. Crystals that you can use is amethyst is a wonderful one, because it gets you in touch with your intuition. And your intuition is like the cord that's pulling you towards oneness and unity with others. So sometimes you may feel something in your gut about a person, be it good, be it bad, in terms of stay away from this person because they're going to kind of drag you back down and it's toxic for you right now. And then the other one is maybe, this is a good person to know because they're going to help you further on your journey. And it doesn't mean that the person that's toxic for you is going to remain toxic forever. But right now, currently where you are in your life and where they are in their life, that's not a good vibrational match. Basically, they're not going to allow you to progress on your own spiritual path because they're going to basically pull you down to theirs, wherever they are. So there are many tools that you can use in terms of crystals, anything that helps you vibrate higher. Now, crystals are just amplifiers. They can amplify the energies within you and the mental thoughts that you hold. So amethyst and some of the higher vibrational stones like rose quartz, angel aura, things like that, in the higher violet frequencies and colors, and even light pinks, they absolutely can help you kind of get to that place. But at the same time, if you have not built a foundation, then there's nothing to amplify. They only amplify what exists. So you must build that foundation first. And then when you start wearing rose quartz or, having amethyst and those crystals with you during meditation, they'll amplify those feelings within you and that energy. But you have to start somewhere. So it is really about you kind of just going through your life experience and discovering oneness in your own unique way. I discovered it through a process of meditation and through noticing the patterns in my life in terms of synchronicities and people coming into my life for a particular reason and getting a lot of mirrors in my reality. So that was my process through patterns, synchronicity of events, reflections back to me and some very strange kind of spiritual experiences that I've had, and meditative states. So it was a process in that way, but it can happen to you in other ways. You can actually enter into a place of oneness in many different ways. Some people might need to take some form of hallucinogenic in order to have that. Some people might not ever need a hallucinogenic, like, DMT or shrooms or anything like that, because they can find a place of spiritual oneness without connecting the synapses that way, but they can feel it in their heart and they can have that kind of opening in that way. But I would say that anything that helps amplify those energies and anything that's on the frequency wave of the violet light spectrum, which is the symbol for what we can attain in enlightenment as far as our total understanding and divine love and feeling that oneness with everything. Next one is this. What has been the hardest thing about being in oneness while others are not? Kind of what I said before, the idea that you can see the world the way that it is, in terms of you can see how everybody is so connected, and at the same time they don't see their connection. So it can be frustrating. It can be really frustrating, and it requires you to have a lot of gentle patience and understanding of where people are. And I don't believe in spiritual hierarchies at all, in terms of, since I believe in spiritual oneness, there is no such thing as a soul who's more powerful than another. Every single soul is exactly the same. Like, if you had to weigh the value of our souls, it would be the exact same measurement, basically, or the exact same weight or mass. And that's because I do see that we emanate from Prime Source in the same, how can I say, I guess, the same amount of power. So no one comes from Prime Source with less power and more power. And that's my problem with what we've had about in the past with the kind of the priesthood and also the chosen ones and ordained ones, and the idea of, in religion, a lot of times they say that some people have more power or more authority and are closer to God's will. And that's just not the truth. Not when you really get into the subtle truth of reality and you actually see and understand the energetic world and how it really works, and how there is, I mean, we're exactly the same in terms of our spirituality value, our spiritual value, our power and our strength. And it's only an illusion that some people might be weak because they're not awakened to their true strength yet. And it might be an illusion that some people are more powerful because that person has awakened to their inner strength, and either they use it for good for others, or they are using it against others and take advantage of others. So there's no spiritual hierarchy, but that has been kind of the hardest thing, is seeing that there has been one playing out and people have divided each other, and people do feel powerless, and some people feel really powerful. I think that's the hardest thing, because when you see spiritual oneness, you can see the equality. And when you can see the equality, then anything that's inequality and that's unequal bothers you. It's like you want to fix it, or you want to, But I've learned just to be patient with it and to be understanding that everyone is on their own spiritual journey, and that the person that feels weak and is not powerful in their own lives, they just have to awaken to their power. And the person who feels that they are really powerful and they have all the power in the world and they can take over others and, dominate over others, they will have a lesson where they will learn the balance of that, where they're not so powerful. So it all balances out in the end. And that's how I do believe that the oneness factor works. The idea that anything that's unequal or unequal right now in terms of energy, in the end, it will be balanced out. And that's kind of also how karma plays along as well. Everything is balanced out, reaches an equilibrium. Just like water in the ocean, everything is on the same level. This is a good one here. Can you name famous souls you think were in a state of oneness on our earth? I think so. I think a lot of people that have been in a state of oneness are those that we really remember. Not saying that there have been people that, we don't know and they've never been famous, but at the same time, they were in a state of oneness, and maybe some of those people. But there are people that I believe were in a state of oneness, and they made it their life mission and kind of a goal to help others learn that too. I think that I think Einstein actually had a really good understanding of spiritual oneness. Even though he had a scientific mind, I believe that he was trying to show the idea of relativity and the idea that how things look different from the perspective that you're at, and at the same time, they're all the same, that there's an equality there. And I do believe that Einstein understood that. I just get the sense that he was definitely in a state of oneness. I believe that a lot of humanists are the people that helped humanity, believed in oneness in terms of, human rights movements. Gandhi, of course, I do believe he definitely was. People that tend to stand up for the underdogs of society, or the people that need the most help, that are being taken over by tyrants, and that need to be freed and liberated. I believe that they believe in oneness, and they're only kind of a messenger for that. So at the same time, they become a leader of some, humanist movement, but at the same time, they believe in spiritual oneness of everyone. So that's kind of how they get people involved in those movements. And I believe that that's the people that really made a difference in that way. I think that Carl Sagan had a good understanding of spiritual oneness, especially with his book, The Contact, that he wrote, and later on it became a great movie. And just the way that he spoke about things, I think that he saw oneness, and he kind of understood it from the idea of different dimensions. And I think that when he said that there's something beautiful unknown is waiting for us, I believe in a way that he's saying that is that it's going to be beautiful for all of us, because he's making a statement about how it's a beautiful fact that is going to be known to us in eventually, or that is waiting for us. So he's making a statement about all souls, that eventually they will have a realization that there's a beautiful truth that they will awaken to. And I really do believe that Carl Sagan was in that state. I think Tesla was too. I think he was trying to find free energy for every soul, because he understood the equality of people, and that large corporations shouldn't take advantage of others. And I think he was trying to really give that to the world. So I think that he was one of them too, for sure. I think a lot of artists and people that express themselves through the beauty of painting, like Van Gogh, Monet, I think that they are in a place of spiritual oneness that allows them to reflect kind of the beauty that many people feel in their hearts when they look at nature, or when they look at something. And I think that that's why they are able to paint that way. I think that when you do enter a place of spiritual oneness, and it is deep within your heart, it gives you courage to put that message out there, because in a way, if you've woken up to that spiritual oneness, you want everyone else to wake up to that spiritual oneness, because you know how much it meant to you, and what an experience it is, and how it has changed your life a little. Van Gogh has a sad story, and I really love, there's a beautiful movie on Amazon. It's basically taking his paintings and creating his life. But at the same time, I think that those that can paint with such beauty and express themselves like that, I think that they would have to have entered a state of spiritual oneness at some point. And it's not always constant, but at some point they must have entered into it. So I think that there's a lot of famous souls that have. I think Jim Carrey, people make fun of him a lot, but when he started talking about spiritual things, what he's trying to do is he's trying to express this state of oneness that he's kind of reached. And he has this amazing experience about life and the universe, and he's trying to have everybody else kind of understand it too. And this is somebody that, went through a life of being famous and then kind of had his awakening. Russell Brand is the same way. I think that he has entered a state of spiritual oneness, and he's still kind of figuring things out, but he made his channel and is talking very openly about spiritual things, because he too wants others to awaken to their true power, as he has. Let's see, the next one here. Are there any books or movies that can inspire a spiritual sense of oneness within that you can recommend? Sure. The Oneness book here is great. The one I read in the very beginning. A lot of the movies that I put on my 50 movies for the soul, I noticed that the reason why they uplift me is because they show that sense of oneness. But I wrote down here that Amelie gives me a sense of oneness, especially because she has kind of this spiritual awakening through the process, and she feels all of a sudden like connected to everyone, and she wants to start helping others, and that kind of helps her life too as a reflection of that. A lot of sci-fi movies always give me a sense of oneness. So I have Arrival, because Arrival, even though it's about other beings from another planet, it gives a sense of oneness with the whole universe, that we're working together. And if you know the end, the aliens give a gift to humanity so that later on humanity can help them in the future. So it's a exchange of gifts. That to me is oneness right there, in a sense of taking away the idea of time and just seeing as everything as infinite, and how we're constantly helping each other. I would say Interstellar showed me a sense of oneness. Just how humanity has to pull together to help each other, and how life goes on, and that connection is felt across dimensions, and you don't lose that love that you experience. I really do believe that too. The Fountain, I think that one with Hugh Jackman is about oneness, because it's about oneness within yourself and reaching that place of oneness within. The Knowing, another sci-fi movie. Now that one can be, it was supposed to be kind of like a little bit like of a scary movie, but in the end, you really learn that they're really just trying to help mankind. Sorry if I spoiled anything. But that movie with Nicolas Cage and the aliens, that's a very interesting movie too, because it shows that there's a deep connection between other beings and humanity. So there's that oneness again. Yeah, I think that a lot of sci-fi movies are showing oneness. So I could recommend a lot. And I'll do a video on Starseeds one day, because it'll show all the different sci-fi movies that I love. The last one is, what do you do if someone you love is not in a feeling of oneness with everything but you are, and they hate the world and they think the world is a really dark place? Okay, this is an excellent, excellent question. And the last one. What I would say is you need to wait patiently within the place of oneness that you're in. And if you are enjoying the experience of seeing the oneness in the world and observing it in others and reflections of yourself out there in your reality, then you need to also be patient with those around you, because one day they might have that same kind of realization, but it just might not be at this point in time. And reality has a way of reflecting our inner thoughts. So if you focus on your own experience of oneness and you're just patient and, understanding about where they are, and yet you still have fun on your own in terms of your own unity with others and spiritual oneness that you're feeling, then eventually the people around you will start to reflect basically that reality that you feel. And so it is with patience and kindness and compassion that we are able to wait patiently for others to join us in that experience of oneness. I think I said everything I needed to say to answer those questions. So let's go to any comments or questions you may have. I can't wait to read them. Peachy Fruit, the infinite perspectives of the infinite creator, a light refracts into millions of particles of light. Mm-hmm. That's how I see it, is I see it as light. I love taking a clear crystal prism and holding it up to the light, the sunlight, and then seeing the rainbow, because that's basically how I see the world. And I don't see souls, like I said, on a hierarchy. We're all just learning. We're all just going through our journey. And some souls, it takes them longer, it takes them shorter time. And we're all reflections of a greater creator, and I really do believe that. Siren of the Void. That's awesome how we could become more like the people in Star Wars. Yeah, I think that we would have a diverse planet of many different people and beings. I mean, if we really want to think that we're going to, finally get UFO disclosure and know that there's other beings here and things like that, we could get to a place where we start to experience a really diverse world with so many different personalities and different looks and expressions. But at the same time, we could still probably experience that spiritual oneness. That would be the ultimate goal, I believe. Tina T, mirroring. Mm-hmm. Oh, mirroring, yeah. Everything is a mirror basically to me. And there's just so much that you can learn, when you finally realize that. Peachy Fruit, I read some text that stated the reason we often yell at others is because spiritually or emotionally we may feel distant from them, and to raise our voices to attempt to get them to hear us better. Well, yeah, I think emotionally, yes, because that at your part, that's like your ego saying, I'm not being heard. And I do that all the time with my husband when we fight. I'm not being heard. I'm not being heard. But when you get out of the ego and you take more of an objective approach in relationships, you're actually then able to step out of that and then hear the other person and then learn from what they want. And then you have some kind of transformation within yourself when you learn what they want is kind of what you want or what you don't want. And that's when you can make some decisions, but we never are listening to each other when we're yelling at each other or when we're trying to get our point across. We have to come from it from that's the other thing I should say. Spiritual oneness to me is objectivity. Subjectivity is not spiritual oneness. That is individuality. That's my life. That's my thoughts. That's my opinions. That's my subjective experience. But objectivity is when you remove the subjective experience and you come from the objective place. And it's hard, you have to kind of cultivate that, and you have to train yourself to be more objective. That's the other thing I should say. The elves were very objective. They were kind of known as fair judges in that way, and being objective. They wouldn't take sides. They had no bias. They would simply go with what they felt was most aligned to the will of Eru, like to the will of, the divine creator. If the creator wants everybody to live and prosper, then they would be aligned to that will. And so objectivity is a really big one, and it could really help us in our relationships. But it's hard for us to remember when we're in that moment. But it gets easier. And then you had a second part, peachy fruit. Whereas when you are close to others, you talk softly or even don't talk at all, because you have such a level of understanding that words don't need to be spoken. Mm-hmm. I think so. I mean, yeah, the distance emotionally is definitely then felt on the outside too. It's all connected. So I could see that. That makes a lot of sense. Oh, Tina, that's a good recommendation. The Power of One. No, I have not watched The Power of One, but it sounds like it's about oneness, so I'm sure I'll love it. Is it a documentary? I will check it out. Unity is something that lights you up, Siren of the Void. Really empowering. Good. Yeah, me too. And unity with diversity. Like, I love seeing so many diverse souls, but at the same time, they're unified in a spiritual way. Kind of like this community, we're all so different and we express ourselves so differently. And if we think about fairy realm, it also represents fairy realm. So not only advanced alien civilizations would live like this, but think about fairy realm. You have all these diverse creatures, and they're all helping different elements of nature. They're appointed to different aspects of nature, and they're the spirits of different, objects and aspects of nature. But at the same time, there's a sense of unity and oneness within them. And so that, I believe, is also very represented in the fairy realm. Very, very diverse creatures. Very, very diverse, but they're working together in many ways. And even if sometimes they're unaware of it, it sounds like humanity too. Humanity can be like a fairy realm if they if we had a little bit more magical looking trees and flowers, maybe. You love looking at the sky, Sylvie? Moonfae? Yeah, nature, sky, anything like that just really instantly reminds me. I love looking at the sky too. You know what? Actually, at night, if you could see the stars, that's also how you can remember your oneness, because you can see that you're part of something much bigger than yourself, your little, your small self, your ego self, right here with your problems, with your bills to pay. And it can remind you of a greater story that you're part of. I like looking at the sky too. Even the daytime too, when you see the clouds and everything like that, it can be a really peaceful feeling that can overcome you and make you feel like you're connected to everything. Everything is connected. I believe so too. Yeah. I think everybody's on the same page here. Probably like Rivendell. Yep. That's basically, yeah, I mean, I think it would be a lot like the Elven Realms, actually. It would be very similar. And everybody's on the same page. This is great. No questions, nothing. Let me just check Instagram, make sure nobody left one question. I just wanted to get everything in this video, but everybody's meditation is hard for me at first because my mind can be too noisy, peachy fruit. Yeah, I like to do mindful meditation practices where you're not trying to empty your mind, but you just kind of accept things, and eventually the thoughts are not so concrete in your mind, but they're just like little, like clouds floating by. Like I said in the video that I did about meditation. Let me just check one thing here. I think we're good. I think the people that who have reached oneness are already part of this video. So I think we're good. But hopefully those that have not and might think that it's, silly, or it's light and love fluff, or it doesn't really, it doesn't really exist, and that you can't prove spiritual oneness. I mean, that's the thing. You can't really prove it, but you can start to understand it energetically. And I think there's a great TED Talks video where a man is proving how everything is connected by music and by mathematics. So that's a really great video to watch if you just need some more concrete evidence, because I'm talking from a very emotional, spiritual way of how I experience oneness in my life. But how can I prove that to others so that it's not something that, that's just my experience? Well, it can be proven in the energetic field. And that's what they're doing with quantum physics. They're trying to prove that everything is connected. So I think in the future, we'll get more and more proof and evidence of that, which will be really exciting, because then people won't be able to say, this is just, spiritual BS or just nonsense. So I think everyone... Oh, Pandora. Yes, Jim Carrey was saying some quite powerful things, and he has some kind of awakening for sure. Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, he's not the only one. There's a lot of people that I think have entered into a place of oneness. Morgan Freeman, I mean, he created that channel, or he's part of it, that through the wormhole. So anyone that wants to share with others spiritual ideas or theories of oneness, or our connectivity in that way, then they must have reached a state of oneness. Because when you reach a state of oneness, all you can do is you just want to share it with others, because it confirms what you have experienced. It also helps bring more things into oneness and into alignment with you, and in alignment with all. And that's basically the goal. And so when you reach oneness, you can't help but bring it also outwards into your world. And so I think that anyone who has ever talked about spiritual oneness has entered into that place. Keanu too. Yeah, I think Keanu Reeves, I haven't heard him speak about it spiritually, but I'm sure when he did the movie The Matrix, and at the very end, when he sees that everything is connected by light, I'm sure that he probably had some kind of connection in that way. I haven't really heard him talk outside of a lot of movies, but I think so. I think so. But everyone is on the same track here. This is great. So I will make another video on movies in regards to sci-fi movies, and what I have found out there that have really helped me reach a state of spiritual oneness, an identity with something bigger than my ego, small self. Also identifying with star families and other extraterrestrials that are maybe not part of the human collective, but are outside of it, but still offer that state of oneness. And like I said, if you have not listened to The Abyss, please check out the 4-part series. It's just the alien parts only, because it goes into more detail than the movie. And I think that will bring in a state of oneness, because like the movie did for me when I was younger, and at the same time, the book is far more detailed, so you'll get more of an experience with that as well. So I'm so happy everyone joined me today. Everyone have a wonderful rest of your Sunday, and I will see you soon. I'm doing something fun on Wednesday, so join me for that video. And Han and Lei, everyone. Take care.